We're good to go.
Okay, we will call this meeting to order at 5:33. And we'll have the approval of the January 13, 2021 minutes. Are there any additions, subtractions?
I can so move.
Amendments?
I can move. That way.
If you're moving to approve, I second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes from January 13th, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it and the minutes are approved. And then we'll move on to item number 2, which is the Luxair report. And I guess Steve is not online, is he?
No, I did not receive anything in email from him.
I thought there was something in an email on the number of operations. I mean, okay, that was probably in the minutes from last time. That's what I thought. Yep.
Yeah, I didn't receive anything or talk to him about anything new or upcoming. I know that the recent weather conditions out there have really stifled things, and I mean, they've been doing their snow removal, and the airport looks like the planet Hoth right now with everything that's going on. But other than that, it's pretty dead right now. So I don't know what he would report. I know that looking at the hangars, there's still damage from the derecho, and there hasn't been a whole lot of movement in that area. I mean, obviously with the weather the way it is, but I went out there, I think Tuesday, and I talked to a couple of the flight instructors out there, and they said they haven't been working a whole lot because of what the weather conditions have been, and which is completely understandable. So I don't know if there'd be a whole lot to talk about right now anyway from his perspective. So I think we could move on then. Item number 3, the chairman's report. And I guess I'll base my report on the meeting we had yesterday with Jerry. I thought it was very informative. I'm sure we're going to get into it a little bit more in detail in this meeting. But I think that the city's on the right path with reaching out to the consultant. I think the consultant seems very knowledgeable, especially about what's going on in Iowa and even Eastern Iowa for that matter. And I think that the information that he gave to us in our pre MMAC meeting is going to be vital for us going forward. So I'll leave it at that. I know we're going to go into detail on it, but I was very impressed with what he had to say and the direction that he wants to take this thing in. And I look forward to future conversations with him. And anyway, I'll leave it at that. So anyway, moving on to items for discussion, the capital improvement program update. I assume Tom wants to take that.
I think Mike's going to take that one.
Okay.
I don't have the agenda in front of me, so I'm trying to upload some projects for the city council. So the first one this summer.
So Mike, it's beacon signage approach were the 3 items.
Okay. So the beacon, I did meet with Jane. We went out to the police station and went up on the roof and took a GPS shot where we could potentially put the beacon. So Jane is working on that right now to get some quotes to bring back to city council, and then we will apply to the DOT for the funding for that. But we would be able to basically tap into the power unit up there on top of the roof and mount it on the, we call it the fence that kind of shields the unit on top of the police station, and it would be on the very southerly end of the top of the police station. So that is progressing.
Provide
The,
a little update on that.
sure.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay. It says that host disabled participant screen sharing.
Hold on, Jane, just one moment.
Okay,
Like we have our own production studio.
Jane, you should be good to go now.
apartment building. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the spot that Mike and I were looking at over here. And this is the view from the roof. And so from the FAA advisory circulars that I had read, I thought it would be possible to possibly angle the beam so it would go over the top of this unit here. And so this is kind of what the shots that Mike took. This was the fence over here, and this is the roof unit. And so the roof unit sits about 2 feet higher than that fence. So I've been talking back and forth with one of the manufacturers / suppliers. And when I sent them the information, they said that they always place the beacons at the highest point on the building, which at the police department would be the blue wall. So I don't know if that's a possibility or not, Mike, if you want to look into that further. I don't know what the accessibility is on this side, but if we were to put it over here where we talked about, we would have to make, so basically what the supplier said was that they can't angle the beam, so it's always parallel with the horizon. So it has to be at the highest point of the building. So basically, to get it as high as that blue wall, this fence is approximately 6 feet high. You'd have to pretty much double that height to get it as tall as the blue wall. So that's something that we could look into further, but I just thought I'd give you an update on kind of where we're at on that.
There's power there, Mike.
What's that?
There's power right there.
Well, yeah, we were gonna, if not next to the blue wall, there's not that I know of. That's why we were looking at closer to the unit on top, because then we can just tie into that power. So we would have to go back up there and look and see what's closer to that center blue wall.
Well, typically next to mechanical units, there's convenience outlets for them to maintain the units.
Yeah, that's why we were looking at that location, and then it wasn't as obvious sticking out with a flashing light on top of it as well.
Well, what you're saying, Jane, you'd have to mount it on some kind of a mast to get it up clear on the existing location, to get it higher than the blue wall, some kind of a mast.
I was kind of envisioning like replace this post with one that's twice as high, and then there'd have to be some kind of platform on top of it, because the unit itself, has a 16-inch base. Obviously, this isn't 16 inches across this post, and the unit itself is 75 pounds. I know Mike was asking me about that, so it's decently heavy.
Is there a possibility to get a tip pole out on that property where we could, maintain it and bring it down and everything that's close to power, or does it necessarily have to be on top of the building?
You're saying instead of the police station, put it next to the airport, or somewhere on the police property?
No, we could still leave it on the police property, but I'm just asking if, I mean, would it be easier than extending a fence up, maybe putting on a tip pole adjacent to the fence or something like that? I mean, I'm just asking questions here.
I guess I don't know that. I know that it's supposed to be so it's not obstructed. So I would think if it's not on top of the building, that would be obstructed, but I don't know those regulations.
Can you go back, Jane, to the picture of it? Can you pull that up again?
You want the picture of the light?
Yeah, yeah, the one that I think she showed it briefly.
Oh, the picture of the light.
Yeah, just the what?
Yeah, this isn't their correct one. Let's see here. Just a second here. Okay. So that's what it looks like.
It's a little disturbing that the other lights you were showing for other purposes seem to have that's the only one that I see that requires some kind of a flat surface to mount on.
Can I ask another question regarding this? I mean, is this something that we're going to possibly use the same area for to put like our ADIS platform on and I mean, other things, or is this something that maybe we could possibly use as a multi-purpose area for the airport? If so, if we do think that's a possibility, wouldn't some sort of a tip hole next to the police station be a more advisable option?
I wouldn't think that the roof would necessarily be bad, even in that circumstance. And it seems like if you were going to put it on a pole, if you start out on top of the building and do a 10 or 12-foot pole, that's better than being beside the building and having to do a 50-foot tower of some kind.
I guess that could be true, but like, what about, everyday maintenance to the item? I mean, it's a police station, so I'm sure it's a secured location that you're not going to just be able to walk through the door and work on something. I mean, is that an issue, or I mean, would a maintenance team have access to inside the building to get on top of the roof every day? I mean, I guess that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, notice.
What are you going to do to it every day?
Well, I mean, you could check the lights every day. I mean, not every day, but I mean, there are maintenance issues that are going to have to be done, especially if you decide to include like an ATIS type situation to it. I mean, I know out at Eastern Iowa Airport, they definitely do daily pre-checks on their systems. So, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that someday we're going to have somebody over there every day to go, okay, the lights are working, we're getting a good signal for ATIS, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that pole looks nice.
Well, something like that can be put on off to the side on the airport property.
Yeah, I think the issue was that there wasn't a place on city property at the airport that wouldn't be in the way of aircraft. But that kind of a thing at the police station would work as well.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point is that I know that I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever tried to get into the police station for anything, but it is pretty secured location. So it does take a little bit if you want to go in there. So, I mean, maybe a pole like that adjacent to the police station might be a better option. That way we're not, interfering with what they're trying to do. And I mean, if it did come down to a daily pre-check or whatever on the maintenance on that, maybe that might be a better option. I'm just asking.
Yeah, Tim, Grant here. I would well imagine that as we think more about this, and if this is the ideal location for it, and I don't want to go by what Mike or Tom are thinking, but I think we can have some defined arrangements with PD in order to give us the level of access for any kind of maintenance or inspection that might be required by any kind of service protocols that we set up for that. So anyway, I think we can talk through that and come to a reasonable resting point, would be my expectation.
Okay.
So like the Beacon, Jane and I will have another meeting out there and continue exploring options.
Sorry, I had a whole conversation with myself in the basement. My apologies. Yeah, so I agree with Grant. Maybe we look at the options and bring them back for a final determination at the next meeting, and we can kind of lay it out. These are the three options that we see as moving it forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with the situation and that they know that, there is going to be a possibility of having, airport personnel out there that are going to be doing some inspections and some maintenance and that it could be a daily situation. So that's all I was concerned with.
It might be worth finding out if we're really talking about a daily, like even if you were on a tip pole like that, do you really want to be doing that every single day? And is it necessary? I can't think of any reason that it wouldn't be necessary every day, even if there was a AWAS or ATIS type solution. I would hope that would be very, very standalone and remote, and you look at it once a year, and then only if it's giving you problems.
Well, I do know that, the reason that we went with, we have a trans closure for the lights is so that we do have access to it. And I mean, if there have been adjustments made to the lighting system recently, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that, they could be there, 2-3 times a month, maybe not for 6 months, to adjust things. I'm just saying.
Well, we're all one big happy family, and police department works for the same
Hold on, are we,
people.
Craig? Are we?
Well, it's the city,
Yeah.
and I would assume that it's all the city. If Mike decides to go out there and jump off the roof of the police department, they just check his ID and let him do it.
I don't know if Mike's willing to do that either.
I have to have an escort even when I'm out there, so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it is a secured location. You just don't walk in.
Sure it is.
So.
Yep, agreed. But the third time you show up, they'll figure out a way to expedite things. And I'd be surprised if it was a real frequent thing. And like you say,
Yeah.
maybe right at first, getting things adjusted right, you'd probably be there more than you want. I would.
Right.
Somebody would.
Looking at the power requirements, it may be a little bit more than just a convenience outlet now that I look at this cut sheet.
Well, a couple of things I noticed was the typical lamp lifetime of about 12,000 hours. And I think it's only consumes 395 watts. So that's about 1/3 of the requirements of a space heater at home.
Yep.
So it looks like pretty much a standalone system, and I think a visual check would be about all that would be necessary.
Yeah, it says right in the specs, mountable on tip pole, so I think Mike and Jane can work with the contractor.
Yeah, the 12,000 hour TBF is pretty impressive for a 14,000 lumen lamp. So that's pretty cool.
All right, Tom, what was the next item?
The next item was this signage.
Right, so we had a request because of the issues with the on the site. We did order 2 signs that say the caution line of sight obstruction from our prison industry. Public service hasn't gotten the sign. Dave and I went out there and marked the 2 sign locations. So you can see one of them is on the north side where you would enter from the apron, the runway, and then the other one is down south and turn around. Due to the fact that technically you're not supposed to have anything except for runway so far.
Am I the only one who can't understand Mike at all?
I was
Yeah,
thinking,
you're
No, you're not.
Can't hear him.
You're really muffly.
All right. How about now?
What mic are you using? Like, are you sure you're using the mic you think?
Yes. Can you guys hear me or not?
Now we can.
So has what Jane has drawn here, we have ordered the signposts from Iowa Prison Industries. Public Service has them. We have marked the physical locations in the field. I don't know if they have gotten them up yet or not, but they're supposed to be working on it. One issue, especially with the snow, is we have to mount those so low, so they're only 18 inches off the ground. But with the snow cover that we have out there right now, it may cover up the sign pretty easily.
So you're saying the signs are already there?
I don't know if they're posted yet. We have marked where they need to go, but I don't know if Public Service, with all the snow removal that they've been doing, if they've had an opportunity to go out there and place them yet.
What dictates that 18 inches? Where does that requirement come from?
Tried to do is just
Right.
follow what the typical FAA signage, like the signs that you see typically at an airport, the ones that are low to the ground and that are lit. Just tried to follow the dimensions and the height of those.
So it's not an FAA guideline. It's just something that we've observed at other locations, or more of a standard of practice.
Yeah, so typically at an airport, you wouldn't see this type of sign. It's more of a, street roadway type of sign. But so there's not really any guidance per se that that we have to follow. So just tried to follow the standard FAA height for a sign and just tried to stay under that. Seemed reasonable.
And to your point, Tim, earlier, there's not a whole lot going on out there right now because of the snow, right?
There isn't. What I think what she's alluding to though is wing height. I mean, if you go much above 18 inches, you're definitely getting close to clipping a wing. So most of this, the taxiways out there are narrow enough to where the wings overlap, and you go right over most signage at airports with your wing. So I think that's definitely advisable to follow those FAA guidelines.
And then
How many of those, Mike, are there?
two. One when you enter the runway, and then one when you are on the south end before you turn around and come back.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on that one?
No, not at all.
All right, Tom, what was the next item?
Approach RFP.
So I sent one out. Craig did quite a bit of editing to it. I don't know if anybody else responded to it at all. But I believe it was included with the agenda. So just looking for feedback.
I don't know. I've looked at it. I thought it was well put together. The only question that I had is, and then you can do that in the contract. What is, and I'm not sure I understand, what is the actual deliverable when they give us what we need? And that could be in your contract because you might understand better Tim or any other, guys, what is the actual deliverable they give us? That's approved by the FAA, I assume.
So yeah, so anyway, talking to Jerry the other day, he seemed to allude to the fact that we could possibly get an LPV approach into Marion. He thought it was possible to get to 200 and a half mile. So if we could get that, I mean, and I asked him directly if it was advisable to go ahead and get an approach started with our current situation with the width and the runway length. And he said, absolutely. He thought that we should apply for that and get it to the point where we can get it published. And then if our runway length changes, then we could reapply for it and get another one published immediately. But, I explained to him what our current situation is out at the airport and what we have to do to get in and on IFR approach. And he thought that we should go forward with what we have currently.
Part of the maintenance that would be provided on this, at least when I was talking to Hughes, was that they would be looking at stuff like that. So as we had plans to lengthen the runway or widen it or add a taxiway or whatever it is we might do, they would be already in tune with that and drafting whatever would need to be changed on the approach so that they're ahead of the game or keeping up with this at least. And then they would be involved in like during construction, there might be NOTAMs that have to be issued, and again, they would be on top of that and issuing NOTAMs and it's insofar as they affect the procedures. And
I thought the RFP was consistent with what I've seen in the past and been familiar with seeing. The only question I had is it was kind of peculiar to me that there was I think a 10-page or 20-page requirement for the bid itself or the proposal itself, and I was curious as to what drove that. I mean, it sounded like you could respond in the other part of the RFP with as many pages as you want, but that was the only thing that stood out to me that seemed different.
So that's just standard language. If you guys aren't comfortable, we can take that out. But we do it because we get 8 proposals minimum, and we don't want to read through that many pages.
Yeah, that's pretty standard.
And you're going to get 2. There's literally only 2 places in the country that'll do it, or that are authorized to do it.
So if you don't want to put a limitation on it, we can take that off. Just know that it may be 1,000 pages that they submit. I don't know. That's why we do it. We don't want to read through their history of their entire company.
Yeah, it's pretty.
No, and in my experience, when we see, one time I got a 600-page safety program as part of a response. We eliminated them right away. So, but
yeah. No, I thought it was well put together. You guys did a good job on it. Does it need council approval, or what do we need to do to move forward?
No, I mean, there's some small things that we still need to fill out. Greg had some comments in there, so we can put the rest of the MAC members on it as reviewers. We can make it so it's submitted as a PDF instead of bound copies, and you guys could give us direction to move forward with soliciting. We could take it to city council and they could give us direction to solicit those services, or we could wait until we have a contract and bring that back, because it's kind of been put in the CIP. So it's a little different of a project, but.
You want more of a selection committee? I see you got yourself.
I was the only one that he left.
Right, I was working from a document that was done for a roundabout, and so I had to take out all the language that we could have ended up with a circular runway, and I didn't want that. And but that was where the list was, and there was other stuff in here like documents that the city provided to help you come up with your proposal, and I didn't know what all might need to go in there. And then Tim, with respect to your point, as far as the type of approach, what I was trying to do is keep all the language real general and just say, yeah, obviously we want precision approaches, and we don't want to have to install $1 million worth of land-based equipment in order to do it. You know, we'd like to work with the satellites and whatnot. So yeah, I didn't get specific about required minimums or anything. And also, my understanding of this thing is that this is them proposing to propose to us a solution. And so these are very broad guidelines. And then they would meet with us to say, here's what your options are. And we would say, pursue these things and out of those options. And then that would be where we would get to an actual bid with numbers in it and details of exactly what they're going to do at each step of the way.
Yeah. Basically, the first step is out of the two companies, which one do you want to hire is based on what they submit. And then once that selection is done, then you negotiate what you want to do with the money that you have.
Yeah.
And schedule. I think you had that listed somewhere, you know, if it takes 6 months or a year, very possible.
Yeah, I see no reason why you couldn't move forward. Mike, you mentioned a few minor details that need to be amended, but in general, I think there's no reason why you couldn't move forward with that.
Yeah, I'd be all right with moving forward.
Is there someone on the committee that we want to put down if they have questions? Just because if they ask questions about an approach, I'm not going to have any answers, so that it's not me interpreting what they're asking.
I would definitely like to be a part of that.
Okay. And we have done it like when we were doing a roundabout project, the consultants actually come and meet with us and have a pre-proposal meeting. So I don't know if these guys would do that or not, but that's what a lot of consultants do that want to try and get work from us.
Yeah, the reason I say that is because I definitely want an option for circle the land with what we've got going on out there and the obstructions that we have. I think that's necessary to look at what we can do to accommodate both ends of the runway.
Yeah, and that's I wrote this to say an approach to both ends of the runway, and yeah, and Hughes specifically talked about circle the land and said just put another approach on the other end. It's a dangerous thing to do, and at the time he was looking at obstructions and he was looking at our layout and said, yeah, we would just put an approach on both ends. So, but again, that's getting ahead of the game. That's all part of discussing what exactly we want them to do in the course of putting a budget together and whatnot.
I assume you have, once they get it all designed and approved by FAA, at least give us an idea what is equipment, what that's going to cost, and some opinion what it's going to cost for it to get in and installed.
Hey, Craig, did they talk about creating more fixes out in the airspace to accommodate this? I mean, we all know what the approach fixes are going into CID and what the approach fixes are to going to MXO. Are they talking about creating new approach fixes for this? Or did they even get into that arena discussion?
The extent to which they got into that level of detail, which is a lot more detail than what we got into, was to say that they would be responsible for all the airspace changes that would be necessary in order to get this thing done. So whatever it is you need to do, that would get done. But they didn't say specifically, we're going to, put a fix here and one here and whatever. But they did I send you the rough sketch that they gave me of what an approach might look like laid on our specific map?
I didn't receive it. I mean, there's a ton of fixes out there right now, and I assume that they would use like
I don't think
an
it's
NOSA for like 1.7 but
yeah, I don't think it matters. I mean, I think that they'll figure out what they need to figure out and do what they need to do. And I can't think of any issue that we would have with any of it.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying though that I don't know what it takes for the FAA to approve a whole another slew of approach fixes because it does change what CID does. I mean,
well, fortunately, we would be hiring somebody that this is what they do, and it's all they do. And so they would, if they can reuse something, or if they can, they'll do what they need to do in order to give us what we want, and then give us options so that we can decide, this might take an extra 6 months if we choose to do this, or you guys are going to have to spend $1 million on a longer runway if we do it this way, or whatever. They'll give us those options to talk about. But this is all they do. That's 100% of the time. This is the only thing that they're doing, is designing airspace and approaches, and for little airports like ours and big ones.
So we might possibly get an arrival out of this. Is that what you're saying?
Right. He said, he specifically mentioned arrival and departure procedures. And of course, the changes to the airspace itself, because it's Class E airspace, and I assume there has to be some, or Class G, right?
Well, we're not
there has
getting
to
an
be some
arrival
changes
into
just
Marion, Iowa. That's for
there'd
sure.
be, he mentioned arrival and departure procedures as part of the whole thing, as needed.
Right. Arrival and departure procedures, but we're not getting an actual arrival into Marion. We wouldn't get an arrival into Marion.
I'm not sure how you're distinguishing those.
Well, arrival and departure procedures are completely different than an actual arrival, because an arrival is an approach to an approach. So we wouldn't get an arrival into Marion, is what I'm saying, because that's for jets that are like, at the minimum would be like your jet traffic for transportation into Cedar Rapids. When we're not getting an arrival.
Well,
we'll get arrival and departure procedures, absolutely, but I think there would be just standard arrival and departure procedures.
That's probably the case, especially based on the amount of traffic coming into both Cedar Rapids and Marion. And it doesn't matter, but I'm sure I've flown an arrival in a little airplane. I'm sure I've been assigned at least a segment of
You might
an
have,
arrival
but
procedure.
the thing is though, in a little airplane though, you don't necessarily want to fly the arrival because it takes you clear the hell out to get to it. I mean, it's like going to 380 if you're going to Mount Vernon from here.
It may or may
that's why
not.
you
It
don't.
depends on where you are, but the issue as it pertains to this is that this particular document will get us to the point where they will give us a document saying, here's what you asked for and here's what we recommend. And that'll include whatever procedures it needs to include in order to be functional for us.
Yeah, at this point, we're only paying the company, so we're getting into the weeds, I think.
I agree. How soon do you think you're sending something like this out?
Make the tweaks, I can send it out Friday.
No. And I assume you need contact info for these guys. Yeah, I'll see if I can, what I can find.
We would likely post it on our website and stuff like that too, even though there's only 2 companies that have requirements that we follow.
Mike, do you need a motion for that, or are we good just to send it out as is?
It's up to you guys and what you feel comfortable doing.
I'll leave that to Tim.
What's that? Sorry.
I was just asking, does Mike or anybody need a motion and approval for that to go out?
Yeah, I think he does.
I think so.
And I'll offer the motion for that.
It's just a recommendation to send it to council and
Yep.
approval and work with Mike to get it out. Okay, well, I'll second it. You want?
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and approval goes out. So.
All right, Tom, I think that's all I got for CIP.
So we're moving on to number 2, which is fixed base operator. I'm sorry, I'm using my other computer because this is not showing up. So fixed base operator lease agreement between City of Marion and Luxair Aviation LLC.
This is just on the agenda. I guess at the last meeting, I think there was a conversation about getting a copy of this for review, similar to in the meeting. I think at the last meeting we had the ordinance on there that established the committee, just for some clarity. We just put it on the agenda if there were questions or comments, or if there was a desire to talk through some of it. But obviously, we wanted to make sure that everybody had it and had a chance to review it. So didn't know if there's
No, I appreciate seeing it, because it based on the our responsibilities, we're supposed to uphold the lease agreement. So thank you for sharing that. The only question I had is I was a little confused by the through the fence agreements. I didn't quite follow what that really meant. That was one of the things I couldn't quite wrap my head around. What does that really mean? Do you know, Tom?
I can tell you what I know about it, and Lon's probably more familiar with it, but I think it provides the opportunity, if you have a private hangar on private property, you can go through the fence onto the public property and access the runway. So because there's public and private property out there, it just provides that access. And, you know, I believe it's in there that there wouldn't be a fee. So we couldn't say because you're on private property and every time you go through, you got to pay a fee or something of that nature. I believe that was in there. But Lon, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, or Mike, but that's as I understand that type of an arrangement.
Yeah, it provides the opportunity for a dedicated access, private access onto the public property. You know, if you think about a lot of the airports, they have fencing all the way around the perimeter of the entire site. And, you know, FAA controlled airports, you can't have a through the fence agreement that allows for someone to have, you know, a private hangar or a business that backs up to it. And we wanted to preserve that opportunity, knowing that the future around the airport area was commercial and industrial properties, something unique that you can't do everywhere. It'd still be secured. I mean, you'd still have to have control over it, but not, as Tom said, you wouldn't want to start setting up toll gates on them.
Or charge them more.
Okay. Well, thank you. In general, it looks like we're responsible. We as the city are responsible for maintenance and for safety. So that was one of the things I wanted to see whose responsibility was that. And it does appear it's more us than it is them.
Yeah, and I think the maintenance of the physical improvements, like the runway, and yep.
Yeah, it talked about lawn mowing and snow removal and those kinds of things. But if the beacon breaks, it was kind of vague. Who repairs the beacon? So, which is probably never even thought of at that time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm assuming that most of the hardcore capital improvements would remain with the city, and the softer side of the improvement or maintenance would be the contract. And I think we talked a little bit about that. It might be wise for us to, as we've been involved for a while, to outline those in a separate agreement, just so there's, you know, full responsibility and understanding, and there's not the fuzziness that we kind of have now on certain things. So.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but it did read that they were very specifically responsible for certain items, and safety for the most part wasn't one of them. So if there was something to happen, I think the city, we're on the hook for it if something were to happen, if it's not negligence by the operator. So I think Grant in the past has brought it up, and I just want to make sure that we keep it in mind that we're responsible for the safety of what's going on out there.
Yep. Any other?
Well, I mean, there are other aspects to the lease agreement that haven't been fulfilled since the city entered into a lease with Luxair that could be brought up later in this lease agreement. So, I mean, if you read the entire lease agreement, the city's on the hook actually for an FBO that's owned and operated by the city. So, I mean, that could be a sticking point in the future.
Appreciate the copies. Now, if we get some questions, we can go back and look at it.
Yeah. there's no others, I can talk a little bit or about the economic impact study and really kind of update the group on the conversations we've been having. I think Tim alluded to the pre-meeting we had. The city has been, and I should thank Jane for putting us in contact with a gentleman by the name of Jerry Searle with HDR. He's had a conversation with him before Christmas a little bit, and him and I just talked a little bit about what we've been experiencing at the airport and how we're really wanting to move towards an economic impact study. He talked to me at great length about maybe there's a need for other items to be in place before we proceed with the economic impact study. I think I brought some of that up at the last meeting, so I won't go through all of that, but the next step was really getting Jerry, I think, in front of a smaller group, and that was Morris City staff. Tim sat in on that. Both Randy and Grant sat in on that, as well as Lon and Mike. And really, we just kind of outlined where we are, kind of an existing conditions discussion. And we're really just asking, what with Jerry's experience he would suggest, or how we would move forward. He's done many of the economic impact analysis or studies throughout the state. I think he said he's worked at over 40 airports throughout the state of Iowa, including help setting up the Ankeny Airport back in the day when it was just a cornfield. So he's got a great deal of experience and frankly was able to sit there and tell us stories, not really stories, but inform us on how other folks have done things that we're trying to accomplish. And so one of the things that he had indicated, he kind of outlined a couple things and as kind of how to move from where we are now to creating some short-term and long-term goals on how we should move forward with and getting to an airport economic study. One of the first things he had identified was moving forward with a minimum of operations document, which really outlines roles and responsibilities, all the parties at play. And I think that was what I had indicated that, I thought maybe before we moved all the way into an airport economic study that we'd want to get some of these minimum standards kind of outlined and put together and get everybody kind of on the same page. It kind of, to Bob's point on the lease, and the different parameters in there, I think getting Luxair, the city, the council, the committee, all on the same page, understanding where we are before we move into a real robust study of the economics would be a good place to start. And just in general, based on his knowledge, I think the committee came out, or the group came out of the discussions yesterday with trying to get Jerry to put together a scope of work to provide some assistance with kind of all the items we've talked about and kind of set the stage for how we should proceed with them. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that, but where we're at is I think the concept was having Jerry put together the scope, get a scope in place, and working with him and the committee to kind of move forward with a process to get to an economic study, which would include taking with the ALP, doing some short-term, long-term goals, and creating those minimum operation standards. So I don't know if any questions on that or thoughts. A lot of people were in that meeting besides me. If there's anything that you guys want to comment on.
I just a couple of quick comments. I do think that really reiterated the fact that some of the things that we're doing the right way right now. He had a lot of great ideas, but some of the things that I had questions about, he definitely seemed to indicate that we were following what we should be doing and going along. I mean, I'm talking about like, you know, the infrastructure changes that we're considering were the right path, even though some of the other things weren't exactly correct, but some of the infrastructure changes that we had proposed or were considering were definitely in the right arena, and then we should consider going forward with those, which was encouraging to me because it meant that we weren't just wasting our time. So that was one thing that I took away from the meeting, and I know Grant has a list that I'm sure he would like to share with you that he took away from the meeting. But I was more focused with the infrastructure that the changes that we were proposing, and I was encouraged by his acknowledgement of the fact that we were moving forward in the right direction. So I'll leave it up to Grant to talk about what he thought.
Well, thank you, Tim. So I think Tom and Tim both sort of relayed this concept. Jerry, I think his last name is Cyril, with HDR Engineering. A lot of experience. He did outline for us a couple of airport initiatives that he worked on. One that seemed to kind of highlight for me was his work for the Sioux County Regional Airport in Sioux Center, Iowa. Apparently Sioux Center had a small airport, and then they decided to enlist other cities as well as neighboring counties to create a regional airport. And so he was at the foundation of all of that work. In addition to defining some minimum operating standards for our airport, of which there's a lot of examples that we can find online to maybe help us tailor the right size document for our needs. He acknowledged that an economic impact study is an important thing to do, but there are other stakeholders involved with it, such as Medco would be certainly a principal stakeholder. And so to lead ourselves into that is going to take some time, but our emphasis should continue to be on the most right things we can do in the shorter term in order to improve the operations and attractiveness of our airport. This is in no order of priority. Just bullet points I took. Focus on the primary runway, perhaps a parallel taxiway and terminal area. You know, we're not at a point where we would want to obligate ourselves to chase down membership in the NIPIAS. And also we would want to do a hard evaluation of whether that is cost beneficial, because if we're in the NIPIAS, that conveys on us a lot of FAA requirements that we may or may not find cost beneficial. So what in that regard, he said, well, you know, there's other funding sources that you can maybe access. And one of them that he mentioned, which we need to think very carefully about, is the formation of an airport authority under Chapter 330A of the Iowa Code. Well, that gives you some financial underpinning through, I think, property tax levy. And I'm going to stop saying any more about that because that's an entire area that I don't know very much about. But there is that vehicle, and some of the smaller airports that Jerry had consulted with, they formed airport authorities, and they did raise significant funding under the auspices of the state code, which then helped propel development activity at the local level for the airport in terms of millions of dollars. So it's an avenue to access dollars and revenue flow, depending on what your immediate and longer term needs are. I think those were the highlights for me that he sort of ran down through. But there, I think he was really suggesting to us, we develop a mindset and a vision of what we want to achieve in the short term and intermediate term, and let the economic impact study be something that would materialize perhaps in the intermediate term once we have some shorter term visions really shored up. So I think I probably created a whole bunch of gaps there, but that's my stream of consciousness.
I would totally concur with you, Grant, on that. I couldn't have summarized it better. I felt like he was very informative. He knew what he was talking about. He actually delved into the fact that he got tipped in on a NIPIUS, and everybody that I know that's a pilot has been tipped in airport, but apparently he got them on the NIPIUS program. And it can be good or bad, but there are several revenue streams out there that we could apply for that would help ease this pill going down City Council's throat. And I think we need to definitely look into every avenue that we can to help us achieve our goal.
Just as a footnote to what I commented on, and Tim, you reminded me of that. There may be some what I would call core economic development funding available that could be fed into our activity at the airport that we just don't have visibility to right now. Again, his admonishment to us was, look at alternate sources for funding in order to do some of the things you want to get done. So that's our challenge. And I really think with Medco's cooperation and assistance, we probably can improve our visibility to those funding sources if they are in fact available.
So Grant or Tom or Tim, what's the recommendation moving forward? What's our next step? I mean, are we asking Medco to jump in bed with us and take the next step? Are we going back to this individual and asking for a level 1 study? What's the ask? What's the next step?
Well, I think what we'd like to do is ask him for a little bit of a scope of work to help us kind of set a path forward. One thing that he did really well was able to kind of lay out a process which we should probably follow to get to the point of the economic study. So I think I had a conversation with this morning. I asked him to lay out a scope of work, and then we can review that. I think that can come back to the committee for a conversation. I think it would be good to also maybe hear from him a little bit. But once we get a scope, we can kind of talk through that maybe internally before it comes to the whole committee. And maybe we can be discussing this at the next meeting. So this has all come together in like the last 24, 48 hours. So we'll strategize on how to bring it forward. But I think that's the first step. I've met with him once, and he's met with the others a couple times. So I think that would be a good move, is just to get a scope of work and kind of get him on board. So
I can say just for myself, talking to him for a very brief moment of time, that he understands the intricacies of moving about the aviation industry to get the monies that we need. I mean, he understands what it takes to move things forward. And I was impressed, honestly. He really impressed the hell out of me. And I think that he understands what we're going through, what we need to, what our goals are. He talked about right sizing the airport so that could meet all the parameters that we need to achieve our goal and to also access that money that we want. So, I mean, yeah, it was a great meeting. I hope all of you get a chance to talk to him, because he was really impressive.
Yeah, he's got a wealth of knowledge that's pretty, very impressive. And I think the good thing is I don't think we can throw anything at him that he hasn't seen before and provide us direction. So, and with his history, I think it's confidence in the direction that will help bring us forward. I think sometimes questions to me or Mike or, we're not in that industry, but man, when we were talking to him, it was very clear. I mean, there was not even a hesitation. Well, the first thing you need to do is X. It's like, that sounds great. So,
the takeaway I took from him is he's one of those folks that would just kind of look at you and go, if I were you, this is what I'd be doing.
Tom, we've talked about this a lot. Has this group ever gone on record saying we need to do this, even if you're talking phase one, more of a feasibility study, that we need to do an economic study of our airport? Have we ever, I know we've talked about it at a number of meetings.
Yeah, no, you have. The council.
We have.
Yeah. And the council, I think the council actually directed us to move forward with it as well. And that's precisely why I think, and Jane said, hey, these are the names of the folks that I really think we need to work with. And I think that was in November. And then I reached out, I think after the December meeting, and had a call with Jerry. And it was the first time. And I think I talked to him, I'm going to say an hour and a half just on the phone. And he wanted to know the lay of the land and kind of what was going on. And that's when he kind of said to me was, we may want to roll the horses before we just jump directly into a study if there's so many questions. And so that's what's led to the couple meetings. Now, I totally admit that it's taking some time to get to where we are. So I need to go back to the council too and let them know kind of why you haven't seen an RFP brought forward. But I think there is a better story to tell before we get to that point.
Okay. And just to tag on to Tom's comments, he was with the Ankeny Airport when it wasn't as popular. He had opposition from Des Moines. So he understands what we're going through dealing with the Eastern Iowa Airport. He already knows what he needs to do. It's incredible wealth of knowledge that we should really harness and use to our benefit to move forward. I mean, am I right, Tom, on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Jane, you've worked with him in the past too, haven't you? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I've known him for quite some time, just known him from like the yearly airport conferences. We teamed up on a project, but we didn't get it, so I haven't directly worked with him, but I talk to him quite often, and we talk about different airports we could team up on and things like that. So and I know he's worked on just about every ALP in Iowa, I think. So yeah, he knows a lot.
So not understanding how Jane's situation is or our agreement is, but is there an opportunity to get him on board as a consultant, as a professional services, hourly rate, or I don't know, is there another avenue to get him on board with the city?
Yeah, that's what I've asked him for, is just to provide us a general scope of services on how he would see working with us and moving things forward. So that's what I'm expecting to get back from him. And he was very cognizant too of the fact that we're working with Jane and Anderson, and I think we'll want to have. I think the idea would be that they would complement each other in contractual documents. So I mean, clearly we want to move that forward in a in a good way as well. I don't think he's trying to overtake anything, and I think he's almost more of the strategy behind, and the technical stuff would come out of Anderson. So
Well, perhaps he could just be a consultant for Anderson right underneath their professional service agreement.
yeah. So, Jane, you said you didn't have a chance to work with him. I think we might have a chance now.
Yeah, this could be it.
So anyway, well, I think that'll be probably a big conversation that we have between now and the next meeting, and bring back that information for everybody to review. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and just one last thing that I'd like to add is I think it was really a positive meeting. It was a very positive meeting. Nothing that we're doing right now is in any way negatively affecting what we could do in the future. It was really awesome, and I think he sees the potential in this airport. And I was charged after we got done with him. I mean, it was great. So I think that if we do have the opportunity to work with him, I think you'll all enjoy it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Does anybody else have anything else to say, or are we good? Grant, you got anything else to say?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for being involved and trying to, move us forward on some critical issues that have been identified over the last few months since I've been involved. So just thanks to everybody. Appreciate it.
All right. Anybody else? All right. With that, we'll adjourn. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep. Have a good evening, guys. Thanks.
Too.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all.